Hey Gary, how you doing today?
Good evening or afternoon, whatever it is there.
Yeah, it's 3:11 in the afternoon.
We'll go with afternoon then. Hi.
So these guys tell me you're the smarty pants in the group.
Okay. Well, my problem is I don't know if we disagree at all. I don't think we do.
Yeah, we probably don't. I think maybe we should just lay out the premise of what it is what we were talking about, right? They were asking if you can prove citizenship, and I said that you can.
Okay, hold on. What do we? If they did, they misspoke. So the idea is, can you prove that anyone is rightly labeled as a citizen?
Yeah, I mean that's a more definitive sentence, and yes, I would say that you can.
Okay, now so citizens, the question mark. Now, see, the presumption is that citizens defined as someone owing a duty of allegiance in return for a duty of protection, which is historically the technical, definition of that word, of that phrase.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that acceptable?
I think that may be the historical reality and probably more related towards America specifically. But here in Canada, they've very specifically defined what a citizen is in the context here. So a citizen is somebody who's sworn allegiance. It's very similar. It's somebody who's sworn allegiance to an individual, Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, and that they're going to be faithful and show allegiance to the laws and good governance of Canada. And
it's not a reciprocal, and there's no reciprocal duty. So they've removed the reciprocal duty.
Well, they imply that the court in interpreting that, I guess, or the court in speaking on the topic says that the citizen knows no duty to the state because the only thing he receives is protection of his life and property. So
hold on. Okay. So that's alluding to the idea that it's a reciprocal duty.
Yeah, but I don't know that it's ever directly. It's not like directly relayed in the statutory instrument that creates the citizen.
Okay.
What is related to the
themselves or later in the timeline, so to speak, right? So I mean, the statutes would apply to. Well, again, the question becomes then who do the statutes apply to? But okay.
Right, and that would only always be related to the specific actions of the individual. Blanketly putting it is the thing that I take issue with, by and large, because it's like.
See, okay, so the crux of our disagreement, I guess, is that very, very thing, the reciprocal obligation. And you're saying, well, if you take, you believe that citizens defined without that reciprocal obligation, then that pretty much means that all it is somebody who has taken has a duty.
An oath of servitude. Yeah, you've taken an oath of voluntary servitude.
Yeah, and there are certainly people in the world who would meet that criteria.
Yeah, and I would suggest that even just the structure in Canada, as far as the law goes, does not create that reverse obligation. What it does, it creates the opportunity for you to exercise civil rights, and then it creates the corresponding duties and obligations.
Yeah, you're going way three exits down, and I'm still on the very disagreement we have about the reciprocal obligation being a key factor, because now, see, again, with the Canada thing, I mean, I know it's not true in the U.S., and I know it's not true. I thought it was, I was fairly certain it was not true in England or any of the, and anything stemming from
Commonwealth,
England, actually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that that's been specifically removed in the definition that you're using. Okay, we're not speaking of the same word. So now we need a word for your citizen, and if you're correct, if you're correct, you're correct. If you're correct about that definition being one that's being discussed in courts and so forth, then you're right. And if you're not, you're not. So it's all come down to
they do suggest that the state has an obligation to protect people and property.
Indicating it. But indicating it as a reciprocal duty in citizenship. And furthermore, I mean, that goes deeper. There's a reason for it, because a non-reciprocal relationship is considered null, usually. Like
if
something has no consideration, normally it's considered nonsense, right?
Yeah, unless it's like a contract of adhesion or, there's lots of different types of, if the concept is that as individuals, our ability to contract is unlimited, we can choose voluntary servitude, right? Conceptually,
no. Yeah, but what happens the moment later when you don't choose voluntary servitude?
Oh, well, the international law says they can't hold you in servitude. It doesn't say that you can't choose voluntary servitude.
But my point is ethically, the moment you decide to no longer be in servitude, you're not. Because you can't bind your future self and your future attitudes. You can't promise to have a certain, you can't promise to agree at a later time.
Right.
It's nonsense to say, you'd have to be a soothsayer. You'd have to be you'd say, I promise that I'm going to agree with this tomorrow. And you're lying. You can't know that.
Right, because your convictions could change. Anything could change, right? Everything's in motion.
Absolutely. You can only describe the past and the present. You can't say I will be served. I will be in servitude to you tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean you could technically make that pledge. I mean, why couldn't you?
See, what are you saying?
Well, you're just binding yourself into the future.
See that binding concept. That's what I'm talking about. So,
but if you're choosing
of binding yourself, what are you physically describing? Okay, we're done with the other topic. We're on the topic of binding now, just to kind of clarify. But the idea of binding, what is it you're describing when you're saying the word bind?
So typically, if you're going to take some type of like what we're talking about with this idea of an obligatory relationship, you're binding yourself to that obligation. So binding it would suggest that there's something that you're required to do as part of the relationship or agreement.
Help me out. I'm trying to figure out what you mean by the word binding, because I think that's where I would find a problem. I suspect there's a problem that I'm commonly familiar with in the use of the word binding. What's that?
I guess that in the common sense of the term, so like you create the obligation, so you willingly can choose.
What do you mean by obligation now then? So you just moved
the requirement to do an action.
Okay, what do you mean by you're moving? We keep moving between synonyms for the same word, and I'm trying to come to the concept. What is it you're trying to say? You're trying to say that you're justified to punish somebody on the alternative?
No, how do we slip to punishment just because something's binding? It's just because you have a binding agreement.
Okay, so you're not using binding in the sense of punishment. So I'll remove the concept of punishment from the meaning of binding. So if someone doesn't do what he's bound to do, what happens? I mean, obviously, it's not a physical necessity. It's not like the laws of physics will work against him. He's completely able to do the opposite of what he's bound to do.
You could say that you're bound by the laws of gravity. So if you build a plane and run off a cliff with the plane doesn't meet the laws of aerodynamics, then you're going to fall thinking that you're flying momentarily and then crash into the ground and die.
But we're obviously not speaking about physics, right? Because you can do the opposite of what you're quote unquote bound to do. You can't do the opposite of what physics binds you to do. It's not possible.
Okay, but what we're talking about is this realm of the non-physical, right? We described this before you were in the call, which is that the idea of what government. And listen, I'm not pro-government.
No. We're just trying to get terms here, because if something you're talking about something that isn't manifestly real, we're talking about something that's imagined.
We're talking about a fictional construct that's played out by a group of people, right? It's a set of beliefs or ideas that's played out by a group. Those people take very real actions that are tangible.
Very good. So in the concept of binding, you have a specific imaginary construct in mind, like the Marvel universe or the comic book land or Star Wars universe or something. You would say that within the imagination of the Star Wars universe, there is no Spider-Man or something like that. But we're talking about fully within an imaginary concept, within a fiction that's created.
Okay, so the very premise of the idea is that if I say I'm going to do a thing, then I'm going to do the thing. I'm bound to do the thing. If we're talking about it in the context, let me finish, Gary, hold on. Let me finish. Let me get it out in full, because it's not, we're talking about complex ideas. So there's a particular idea in place here. When we started, it was citizenship. So if we're talking about citizenship and the obligatory relationship that exists, if it's a voluntary action, to enter into that relationship, let's say, like we're just going to run the hypothetical.
Okay, I'm just clarifying though. You mean within this imagined construct?
Yes. Well, citizenship is an imagined construct.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no dispute there. We don't disagree there. These are just ideas. Okay, right? Money's an idea. Citizenship's an idea.
That was all I was here to get clear.
Yeah.
That there are real people who are labeled citizens. Citizenship itself is an imagined construct with no manifest reality whatsoever. It is, it could be called a delusion if you wanted to. I mean, it's
well, to say there's no manifest reality isn't actually accurate because there's 37 million people in Canada considering themselves citizens.
I'm not saying there's no manifest reality of people calling themselves this. I can call myself Spider-Man. That doesn't make Spider-Man a manifest reality either.
Okay.
So the distinction.
Where's the distinction then? Where's the distinction that changes an idea played out by a group of people from being real from just being imaginary?
Okay. So physics, manifest reality is the distinction. We do agree that things are either manifest.
Is there, but the physics is there. There's tangibly people taking physical actions in the real world, interacting with each other.
And there's real live cameras, projectors projecting Spider-Man movies. The idea that there are physical things that are inspired by fictions does not make the fictions themselves manifestly real. So the concept of citizenship inspires people to do things. All fictional concepts inspire people to do things. The concept of Thor inspires people to do things.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the idea that there are physical manifest things that are inspired by fictions inside of our heads, right? Mm-hmm. Does not make the thing inside our head manifestly real, except as a pattern of thought, right? So
right, but a pattern
of thought.
Yeah, but that pattern of thought can literally be measured as something tangible in the form of a wave. And that same, so let's just relate it to the concept of the light bulb, which was manifest into reality through thought.
I can think about unicorns, and that is a manifest wave. Does that make unicorns a manifest real thing?
I don't know. Just because I've never seen one doesn't mean that it's not a real thing.
Okay,
right?
If we can't agree that things imagined aren't, there's a distinction between imagined things.
Use the light bulb because let's use the light bulb because it's a much better example. It went from a period in time when it wasn't a real thing. It never existed in physical reality. Somebody took it from the confines of their mind as an idea, and then they manifested through repeated efforts in reality.
Right? And light bulbs exist. I can point to a light bulb, but the concept of light bulb still doesn't exist. Like I can't just say a light bulb and say that concept exists except as a thought. But if I'm pointing at a specific light bulb or I'm referring to a specific light bulb, that exists.
Okay, so in the terms of citizenship, because there's people generally accepting the idea and acting on it, they go ahead and make this magical paper that labels you and provides you a status as with this concept within the group who's all playing out.
I can label people citizens. I have no disagreement. There are people who are labeled citizens, and they exist. People exist that are labeled citizens. No disagreement whatsoever.
So are you suggesting then that there's a distinction between the guy who takes the concept, the idea of the light bulb and manifests it into the real light bulb, right? No. Which is physical and has a function, versus the concept of the citizen, which is then manifest through the actions of others.
No, it's not. The idea of a citizen never gets manifested. It's still just the person. The person is labeled as a citizen.
Okay, so there's no disagreement there. We don't have any disagreement there.
Okay. So now here's the question. Does the concept of a label change the physical properties of that person? The manifest reality
within the confines and the rules established by the group that are playing out this imaginary set of ideas, it does.
Hold on. I'm talking about in manifest reality. Okay, don't drag me off into Marvel Universe or anything else.
But that's where you live, Gary.
No, I don't. If you think we live in an imagined universe, then we have a fundamental disagreement about the nature of reality, and we're done. I mean, that's the problem. Is you have no distinction between reality and imagination. We found the source of our disagreement.
Absolutely not. The reality is that I can go outside right now and I can see people and interact with physical people in this physical plane. So there's my mind and the ideas that are in it is, one plane of existence, and this physical plane that we're all sharing is another.
No, you're using the word existence wrong. Okay, we need something else. If you're going to term imagination as existence, we need another term for real existence. Because you keep befuddling the two terms.
I just called it reality. I just called it reality. Reality is the physical thing that we're sharing.
But now you've screwed up the word for reality by dragging in this not reality concept into reality, so we can't talk about reality anymore. You're muddying the concept of reality and existence to the point where we can't talk about reality and existence, and then arguing that citizens exist because they can be imagined. Well, if you've broken down the idea of reality and manifest existence, then unicorns exist. Pixies, everything exists. Everything exists that can be imagined exists with that rule. So you've broken down the idea of talking about what is.
Do you think that the lack of the lack of evidence of something precludes it from the possibility of existing?
Not at all. That's argument from ignorance fallacy. I'm well familiar with the fallacy, and I'm not arguing that citizens. Depending on how you define them, you can say I define citizen as a ham sandwich, and there's one right there.
Well, no, but if you
define citizen as something, if you define citizen as I do, duty of allegiance in return for duty of protection, I can say that there are no known examples of that, and everybody who's purported a label of such under investigation, it has been discovered to be an error. Because there was no duty of obligation, duty of protection.
Okay, so let's diverge from that a second and go back to this concept that ideas somehow don't have the same tangible weight as physical things in reality.
You mean physical weight, like put it on a scale?
Well, yeah, that seems to be your measure for like what is real and what isn't real. So
there are plenty of things with no mass, but that's fine. I mean, if you want to say mass, that's fine too.
Well, I don't. Okay, so. I don't mean like physically being able to measure it in weight or size, but that appears to be how you're suggesting that you determine the difference. Okay.
Yes. Maybe the word manifest is what's needed. Do we agree that manifest reality only includes things that physicists would care about and not things that philosophers no?
I think manifest reality is the thing in people's head that is played out by their perception. Reality is the thing that's measurable and that other people can witness. Right? Because the manifest version of it that our perception creates in our head is one thing, and the actual happening could be different. So
if there were no conscious people at all, do you think that there would be a? See, again, here we are. I see manifest reality as that which we are measuring, not that which we are imagining and perceiving. The perceptions. I'm sorry, scratch that. The perceptions are not reality. The perceptions are something taken from reality, and it's our way of interpreting.
Yeah, perceptions are based on predisposition. So you have beliefs about something when you don't really know, and so you right, and then that creates
senses. And I'm trying to use senses, and you're dragging it back into the imagination and the waveforms, and internal brain interactions.
Well, that's because it's extremely relevant to what we're talking about. Everything that exists around you.
Because you're trying to drag the imagination into the reality. And you don't have that line between them. We can't agree on the word exists. Because we can't agree on the word exists.
Do you believe that human creativity exists?
Now you labeled an abstract concept, right?
I didn't label anything. I asked a question. I said, do you?
Okay. So
does human creativity exist by your definition of the word exist?
There are several actions in reality right now occurring that I would label as human creativity.
Okay. So.
But as an abstract notion of human creativity as something that I could go poke and measure, human creativity is, the location of it is these coordinates and it has this mass. No, it doesn't have manifest existence.
Sure it does. Go touch a light bulb. That was manifest by somebody's human creativity. So there's a tangible thing as a result of the action.
Yes, the tangible result. There are tangible results of Spider-Man. The concept of Spider-Man has been made into movies and comic books. There are tangible results of Spider-Man. In your definition, Spider-Man exists. By your criteria, Spider-Man exists. So there is nothing that doesn't exist by your criteria. My point is you've removed the idea of a distinction between existing and non-existing so that you have this nihilism that you can retreat to for anything at all. Oh. But it makes it useless to talk about existing.
I don't know that I would agree with that. I certainly do draw a distinction. I just believe that thoughts are actual tangible things. They can be measured. Thoughts can be measured.
Thoughts are tangible things that can be measured. Yes, the thought can be measured, but the thing thought about doesn't become real because you thought about it. Thinking about a unicorn does not make a unicorn.
And that's the whole point of what we're saying, because then it's people thinking about the thought and then acting that creates the society. Society exists because people act on it.
And then you turn it around into a reification fallacy. You're saying, of course, now, but then you turn around in the next sentence and use the reification fallacy to say the citizen exists. Because of the inspiration, and you want to act as if that has some physical,
do you think that it matters? Do you think that it matters whether or not there is some physical thing that you can label or measure as a citizen, other than a person placing that label on themselves? That's the purpose of the concept.
Yes. So you agree it's a concept?
Yes, we started with that. We started in agreement that it is a concept.
Yes, but you keep breaking that agreement.
I can prove that the concept exists. So
what do you mean by concept existing?
I mean people playing it out with actions.
There you go. People play out Spider-Man. Does Spider-Man exist?
You'd have to define Spider-Man. Do you mean like the actual guy based on the story that sticks to walls?
Talking about sticking to walls, web spinners, bit by a spider.
I've never seen anyone stick to walls.
But I just thought of it.
Okay.
I just had that concept in my mind. Heck, I've acted it out. I made a play. Let's say I made a play about Spider-Man. Does that mean Spider-Man now exists because it resulted in me being inspired to create something as if it did exist?
I'm not sure that I see the purpose of drawing this semantic distinction between the tangible.
It's because you're doing the same thing. You're saying Spider-Man exists because it exists in our mind, and I agree that it exists in our mind as an imagined concept. And then you're saying, well, same thing, but the citizen is a different thing. This exists because it inspires people to do very specific things. And furthermore, to violently react to each other because of this concept of existence. And furthermore, to act as if they had
I'm on board with all the bullshit. Listen, I'm on board with all the bullshit things that come from the concept of citizenship. Okay? I personally am not one.
But you're employing a reification fallacy to make it seem inevitable.
No, I'm talking about this current state of constructed fallacies that we live in. So we live in a world where we
agree that it's a fiction.
Of course.
Okay,
that fiction has a very real result, though, just like the light bulb.
Right. All fictions have real results. Okay. All fictions have real results. So the concept of Spider-Man resulted in books and movies and everything.
Right, and the concept of citizenship has resulted in genocide and war and theft and all this bullshit.
So when we're saying citizens don't exist, the concept of citizen, though it definitely has very real things that it inspires in people and actions that it inspires from people, doesn't exist as a separate concept in manifest reality. So we're fully in agreement, other than the fact that I object to then continuing on to a reification fallacy to say people are bound to certain actions because of that concept. Except in this fictional construct that you have that I don't want to be inspired by. You want me to be, or you're inspired by it. Good for you.
So if your house starts on fire, or the police, and you don't, not the police, if your house starts on fire and you don't do anything, will the fire department show up to put that fire out?
I don't understand the relevance.
Well, you're talking about the reciprocal duty. So I'm trying to give you one example.
Do you believe that the fire department has a duty to show up? Because they say they don't.
That they believe they have a duty.
No, they say that they don't. I bet I can give you tons of
in Canada it's not
where
like
they agree with that.
In Canada, that's not the case.
I bet you there is no duty of protection because otherwise you could sue them for failing to put out your fire.
No.
So I mean, even within the construct that you have, there's not the duty that you think there is. I don't think.
So I know for sure that if they're on duty and they're playing out the role, the construct, the ideas that they're a fireman, and a call comes in, they have a duty to respond. They don't have a duty to get a particular result.
And what happens if they don't?
Then you could sue the city for negligence, for sure.
You can sue them even if they do. There's nothing stopping you from suing. There's nothing stopping you from suing someone. So even if they did respond, you could sue them for not responding. Bringing a suit, you can bring a suit that has no sense. You don't have to bringing a suit can be done even without, logic behind it. Mm-hmm. So let's try again. What do you believe can happen? What do you believe has changed? Because it's not that you couldn't bring a suit before. You can bring a suit even if there was no fire.
Sorry. So the suit because you're talking about that reciprocating duty. So the reason that you would have the reason that you would have grounds to sue them, and it wouldn't just be a meritless suit, would be based on that reciprocal duty.
Having grounds. Okay. So you're saying that, and again, grounds is the idea that you can inspire a judge to order them to pay.
Unless it's specifically written into the rule of law, then you don't have to inspire. The law inspired. All law is something intended to inspire judges to rule one way or another. They're not even actually bound physically in any sensible way, and they're not even very bound by each other to obey clear reading. That would be different than the system in Canada. The system in Canada, they are bound by the rule of law. They don't have discretion.
Bullshit.
Depends on the way you bring the suit, man.
We have direct firsthand experience of cases where judges have gone against clear interpretations of the English, that was involved in this law.
Like a piece of parliament or another piece of case law? Like an act of parliament that you cited and said, this act of parliament gives me this, protection or to this thing, and then...
You name it. We have instances of both. We have instances where a judge has ruled the opposite, has interpreted something to mean the opposite of the clear language reading.
Okay, and did you take that to the next level of court and say this judge made an error?
I'm sure such things have been taken to the highest of highest courts, and still it ended up being a judge interpreting things the way he felt like interpreting them.
Okay, well, I've read enough case law to see that, humans are fallible, and the position of a judge is a human making, potentially incorrect determinations on things that are...
Biased. Their association of people is biased towards their own power.
Of course.
Especially on the issue of jurisdiction and limitation on their own power.
Of course.
Okay. So this idea, we shit can the idea of this inherent interpretation, right?
Sorry, what do you mean by inherent interpretation? I hate to do this, Gary, because I hate to do this because I'm enjoying this conversation, but I've got a dinner meeting I got to go to. I got to pack my dog in the car and stuff here. So
I'm out of time as well. Got the family waiting.
What I see is the challenge. I see a challenge here in actually bringing something to have a purpose. Like I'm anti the state. I'm the opposite of a statist.
But you're not. You cannot be anti-state with the reification fallacy still within you.
The reification fallacy that you keep suggesting, because I'm talking about the fact that individual human beings are collectively playing out concepts and ideas, is tangible. So whether you believe it or not, or whether you can prove it, is irrelevant to the people that are crazy and acting it out. Okay. They are manifesting reality around you.
You're retreating again to these things being inspiration to people doing violence and things like that. But that doesn't make it real. That makes what they're inspired to do real.
Okay, so no, their actions are the thing that is real, and that is the real thing that we're trying to deal with here. The concept can be manipulated. Well, because the concept of citizenship or any of these other concepts can be manipulated in a way that benefits the outcome we're looking for, because they're just ideas, and like you said, they inspire human action.
But judges interpret to their own biases, and they have to their
own predisposition. Of course they do. They're human.
Human. I mean, that's the only way to interpret. It's the only thing that can interpret these things.
Well, I think that from a deep study of the law, they certainly make and this isn't true of all of them, and certainly there is an overarching feeling of corruption and bullshit that comes with it. It's probably more evident. I'm not sure. My experience with the American courts, Gary, is very limited. You know what I mean? My experience is wholly directed in the Canadian courts, and I can tell you I've seen both types of actions between moral individuals who will look you in the eye and who are trying to reason unbiasedly, and other dudes who are just there to condemn you and have fun.
We have yet to see a sincere approach to the applicability question. The malum prohibitum.
It's because of the way it's coming to the court. Yeah, Gary, I think it's because of the way it's coming there. They view it as a challenge to the concept of the law as a whole.
Right.
And if so if you do that, right, so they view that as a danger to the public because you're suggesting
it's a danger to the biases they have, because it just demonstrates that they are not operating on a principle like reality.
I think they experience something you didn't experience. So they're in that room every day dealing with the dumbest people in society, like real criminals, people who have addiction problems, who are committing crimes, right? So
fair enough. Most of our criminals punish them all.
Right, but what they see is that if you were to create this lawless scenario by applying the Socratic method in the way that you are and undermining
false dichotomy. I am not talking about lawlessness. I'm talking about ethics. But okay.
But the result of the way that you're talking about ethics, so your challenge to the authority of the law to impose or restrict your liberty in some way for the benefit of the group, they view it as a threat, right? Now I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, okay? But they view it as a threat.
And they abandon ethics in order to get rid of that threat.
Right. Because they're looking at this thing, they're going like, fuck, we've worked really hard to create this system. It's like, fuck, it's not perfect, but we're
So they have to abandon ethics and reality in order to go with legality. Because we can challenge them on the basis of manifest reality, and we can challenge them on the basis of ethics. And they will violently suppress the question.
I think that big issue comes down to the manner in which it's going down, right?
Okay, yes, I agree that there might be some manner yet undiscovered that would do so.
Right, like if you're coming through, well, and I'm live in the trenches, Gary. I'm in court often. I'm no slouch here. I live the stuff I'm talking about. I don't have all the paperwork, so I'm in there. You know what I mean?
But you're trying to utilize. You're trying to inspire them by utilizing their own mechanism to defeat themselves through systems they've created to not defeat themselves. And I think that's
then all of a sudden we're talking about tools. When we say
the tools of reality and ethics, personally. I mean, best to you in your pursuits. I'll continue down this road.
Yeah. So as long as they have the constructs in place that we talked about, where there's citizenship, there's an obligatory relationship,
yes, fictional construct.
Right, but those fictional constructs have been acted on, and if you just decided that you stopped believing it, but you didn't take any action to let the other people who are acting on it know.
If I'm asking them to dispense with fictions and delusions and unethical constructs, and they say, fuck that, then we have a problem. At least they need to be honest about that. You see, if they're not being honest about the fact that they're not addressing the challenge raised, what use is there? They're not, then they're just being arbitrary and capricious. How do you negotiate with someone how do you interact with someone who's being arbitrary and capricious? There is no means. They will simply come up with some bullshit to justify their actions. Here you are trying to say, hey, if I make it hard enough for them to come up with bullshit to justify their actions, they'll back off. And fair enough.
I would just flip then to the other side of this. There's other concepts that man has come to recognize that we consider to be the natural law, right?
Bullshit.
You don't believe in the natural law?
There's two definitions of natural law.
Okay, so I'm talking about things that man has recognized.
Universalizability is my definition of natural law, if that's what you're going with.
Oh, you need to describe that further. I don't know what you mean by that.
Kantian universalizability. What traditionally would have been called natural law. The consequence of all people being equal in an ethical standpoint.
Right. So equal in dignity and rights, let's call it. Rights being these fundamental things that are inherent to you. They're not granted to you. They're recognized. Man, recognize them as fundamental to your development.
No. Don't slip the word recognized in there. I don't care about the word recognized. It's a consequence of the idea.
You should care about recognized because it's a defining distinction between something.
No, I'm actually. Well, you can try to shove it in my definition of the word, but I object. Again, I'm using a different definition than you're expecting, so that's probably the trouble. But universalizability is what I'm going with, not recognized universalizability. I'm actual universalizability. The idea that that there is no priestly class. That's
fine. So we're all equal above and before the law. So,
use the word law. The law, and law usually just means the opinion of the highest judge.
Usually. So let's break this down to concepts so that we can have a functioning group of people. If we want to talk about like the positive side of this, not just in defense and using Socratic method to expose the fact that there's a fraudulent fictional thing playing out in front of you, that we agree on. Let's talk about what words can we use to describe the attributes that a human being has and is able to exercise, and when those attributes are able to be limited.
Again, that's pragmatics. You're trying to leave philosophy and the idea of ethics behind and go into pragmatics. And I object to that because first we have to decide what's correct or what's ethical before we can say what's pragmatic, because pragmatic is just might makes right.
No. You're mischaracterizing what I'm saying there. That's not.
Okay,
that's
actually, I'm sorry. I'm seeing the adjustment you're trying to make to the definition and saying the concept.
Well, what definition? No. I'm not trying to make a definition. I'm trying to shift this conversation away from. Okay, let's just use the Socratic method.
We both got it, so we got to put this off for next time.
Yeah, let's do this another time, Gary. I really enjoyed the talk, man. I think we could get somewhere with this. Like I said, the next phase being labeling what the positive things that you are, the positive attributes that you're able to exercise in the group between the other people. And the ethicability part is defined procedurally. That's one of the great achievements of English law, is setting up procedures that are supposed to create fairness. I don't know if I don't agree. It is that way all the time, but that's the concept again, right? If you create,
it might be a concept I don't care what one bit about though.
Well, how do you do it with no concepts or no ideas, Gary? How do you create fairness? Ethics is an idea.
Yes. What if ethics is a labeling system? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a labeling system, and my ethics is based upon universalizability, not the thing that you've just described. So we have a fundamental difference in how we're using the word ethics.
What I'm describing is universally applicable. It's something that we all share. Every human being is endowed. I don't know what you mean there,
because again, you have this fuzzy line between manifest reality and imagination. So I'm not sure we can get on the same page with that.
Because I can walk outside and I can move around and I can pick shit up and I can interact with other human beings. I have attributes that I can exercise, right? In physical reality that will affect other people.
I would call that pragmatics. Well, what is pragmatics to ethics? Might makes right. Right? So ethics isn't something that happens because of physics. Ethics is something we label.
But that that position implies that, like, regardless of what your ethics are, saying that the pragmatic approach might makes right means that the self-defense concept falls into the same idea. So here I am peacefully coexisting. Here I am peacefully coexisting, and somebody comes and tries to forcefully make me do something, and I respond with force.
Yeah, but that happened. You see, that physically happened, if it did. And the question is, how do I label? Do I label that as right, or do I label that as wrong?
Exactly. And so those are important distinctions for the group of people to make, so they know how to conduct themselves when they're interacting with each other. Yeah, that's the whole point.
Right.
That's what
the point.
Organized societies.
And you've tried to propose a system by labeling that I disagreed with. I rejected your system of labeling that and said that when I'm talking about ethics, I am always talking about universalizability.
I don't know what you mean by the term universability or whatever. Like, if you just mean that if you just mean that it's something that is applicable to everyone.
Nope, not at all.
So what do you mean by it?
It is a system of labeling. No system of labeling is going to be applicable to everybody. It doesn't. That is a nonsense concept. Yours isn't, mine isn't, none are.
Oh, okay. Well, that becomes, now you're talking about like the fact that all words are made up and we just assign definitions.
No, I'm not trying to do that, because we have a first principle. A first principle is adopted by individuals so that they can label things as right and wrong.
So why?
And my first principle is universalizability, and someone else's first principle might be the words of Allah, and someone else's might be the words of the Torah. You know what I mean?
So what makes you believe that your fictional construct is more valid than somebody else's fictional construct?
To me, it is 100% valid, just like everybody else's own labeling system is 100% valid to them.
Okay, so let's
there
drop
is no
away.
Other choice.
So
There's
let's
nothing
drop
more than 100% valid to me.
So let's drop away from these individual conceptions and talk about what are the what you're talking. What you're describing to me. You just described to me your individual. You just described to me, Gary, your individual idea, your concept, your fictional construct that governs your perception.
As did you.
Right. And so now let's just as a hypothetical thing, and this has again been the endeavor of educated people for hundreds of years, is to define and recognize what attributes do all men and women share, not things that we give them.
Incorrect.
What do you mean? How is the question?
There is nothing else.
What do you mean there is nothing else?
Okay, so there is no thought that is shared between that is somehow operating each other's mind.
It's not a everybody. No. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not talking about a thought that we all share. I'm talking about physical attributes, meaning things that we're all able to do. So, like, go out and exercise free speech. Go out and exercise in your conceptual beliefs of your choice.
You're trying to drive pragmatics back in. Physics is not a concept of labeling things as right or wrong before it happens.
Maybe you should take a look at quantum mechanics, because they definitely, that's exactly what happens. The observation creates the result.
Incorrect, actually. I can send you a video on explaining the finer details of that observation is not talking about human observation. It's talking about measurement of certain types and the collapse of the waveform. But okay.
There has to be. You have to cross this line into pragmatics. It's ridiculous not to think that if we're going to talk about groups of people interacting together,
you're insisting now upon injecting something that I've specifically rejected.
Because if you reject, so Gary, when you reject it, because Gary, if you reject it, you create, you remove any kind of boundary is a terrible word for this conversation, but you remove the boundaries of how people are allowed to interact with each other. If you don't talk about pragmatics.
Ethics is about labeling something as right or wrong. It occurred, okay? So something happens and we label it as right or wrong. Something is proposed and we label that hypothetical as right or wrong. If it occurs after we've labeled it as wrong, it doesn't become right. The label still stands. It is a labeling system upon an event.
Right. Everything just is.
And you're saying that
everything just
what
is.
happens,
I get that.
what actually occurs has some effect upon that labeling. And I'm saying no. What actually occurs does not make it right. Say it's wrong to murder. Somebody murders. It's like, well, it didn't become right. It just becomes something that happened.
Yeah, so you could draw the distinction, because you just have to talk about it in terms of what creates harmony and what creates disharmony. And so if our objective is to create...
My qualification is not harmony and disharmony.
I understand that's not your qualification, but that's a law of nature. Nature, when it interacts with each other, there are universal laws that are not written down, that are not shared with each other.
Appeal to nature fallacy, man. That's actually one of the listed fallacies. Appeal to nature fallacy.
It's not so you have these like immediate things that you jump to try and stop a flow of idea from even being me finished saying the sentence, Gary. So if in nature, so are you telling me that there are no laws that govern creation? Is that what you're trying to tell me? There aren't laws that govern creation, that govern like the grass and the microorganisms and the animals and you and me. You don't think there's a universal set of laws that governs all that?
In laws, now we're moving the word laws from what we were talking about.
The type physics, like gravity.
Yes. I believe in manifest reality, and we can go ahead and stipulate that I believe in all manifest reality.
Okay, do you believe that there is a a set of laws that exist within that reality that govern it.
Laws would be in physics. Laws are descriptions of what occurs.
That's right.
Not prescriptive.
Repeatedly, every time. There's something that consistently, regardless of what you believe of it, if you take that particular action, there's a particular result.
But all physics laws are descriptive, not prescriptive. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about descriptive laws now. In
That's
the context
right. So I'm talking about exactly. So the descriptive portion I'm trying to get to is defining what attributes are inherent to us that we are allowed to engage in amongst each other that do not violate those principles.
Now you're going over to prescriptive, just that quick.
What? I don't know what that is.
You just jumped over to prescriptive law. I know. Okay.
You've got a whole bunch of labels for these ideas that I've never heard of before.
No, because I've discussed them at length. And the idea of descriptive law versus prescriptive law is not my unique invention. It's something common, to this question. And it's something common to eradicating these, reification fallacies.
Okay, so let's just back up. So you agree that there are a set of laws that govern nature on this planet.
You use the word govern, and that actually is trying to allude to descriptive or prescriptive law. So there is
no, but it does. It very literally controls what happens.
No, the fact that we wrote the law down does not control what happens. It's physics that controls what happens.
No, the laws themselves. Hold on, we recognize laws that control things irregardless of what we do.
We try to.
And we have successfully done so in a number of different areas, right? Like, would that be fair to say?
Some degrees, yeah, to whatever degree we have. None to completion, of course, but.
Sure, because the idea that we understand the creation as it is here is ridiculous. We're not even fucking close.
Yeah.
But we have identified, we have through observation recognized that there are certain laws that govern the behavior of all the things, right? And how they interact with each other.
We've identified describing things around us, yes.
Okay. So does it not make sense to do the same it's not even the question, does it make sense? Do you believe that man has engaged in the endeavor of doing that same bit of observation and reflection with respect to humans and their interaction in nature, since we are part of it?
So we can describe people's mentalities and mental processes and things like that.
No, that's not what I'm getting at.
Prescriptive laws is a whole different concept where you're saying what ought to happen. See, it's the is-ought conflation that we're having trouble with. The reason that exists, Gary, I'll just clarify that real quickly, is that there's harmony and disharmony, and because I'm conscious of both. So one thing destroys life and the other nurtures life. I don't know what you mean by destroys life.
Kills it, creates there to be no life.
Okay, but it can be a very good thing and not wrongful to destroy life.
Certainly.
Okay, so I don't know how to make sense of what you said before.
Okay, so when you look at the laws that govern nature, if a particular—
I don't know what you mean by the laws that govern nature, but okay.
Okay, limited competition, gravity. There's a whole bunch of different ones that govern nature's interaction with itself, and we are part of that.
Descriptively, not prescriptively.
Okay, you're the one making that distinction, not me.
Because you're not. Because you're trying to get me to agree to some prescriptive law of nature, and I don't. I don't accept that concept.
So you don't accept so like when you say that gravity is a descriptive law.
Correct.
Okay, so do you understand when I say the law of limited competition? Like if an animal kills everything that it's trying to eat, it runs out of food, the animal dies, right?
That would be a on the mean in a large group kind of thing, obviously. Yeah,
so like you take lions in the Sahara, if they, for example, overhunted and killed all their stuff, they would fuck up the cycle, they would ruin their food supply, and they would die.
And would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
It just is. No, it just is. It's a result. It's the result of not following one of the laws.
That cannot be labeled as ethical or unethical. It just is.
Everything just is.
It's not
everything
following or
just
not following.
We get to choose. But hold on, Gary. Yeah, this is where it gets ridiculous. We get to choose what is ethical and what is not. I agree. Everything is.
Well, we get to choose our first principle. But okay.
You don't. So we agree that it's an idea. What you're talking about is a concept, so we get to construct it how we wish. So ethics is something we get to construct however we want. If I'm a sociopath,
you can define your ethics this way. Correct.
That's right. If I'm a sociopath, my ethics are going to be quite different than yours if you're not.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So again, we're talking about the concept. So I'm talking about universal laws that govern interaction on spaceship Earth.
There are only universal descriptive laws. You're trying to jump that over into a universal prescriptive.
You're adding the adjective there. I'm not adding the adjective. I'm saying laws. You can interpret that however you like. I'm talking about things that are immutable. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. It doesn't matter what you think of it. They exist. Okay. They are,
yes.
Right? Good or bad.
Yes. And do we agree that anything in the future is exempted from anything you can, declare is, right? It's just your position.
That would mean that gravity might not apply next time I jump off something. What you're saying there
it could be true, but obviously we live our life with the expectation that patterns continue.
Right. So based on that, and this is where I'm trying to go, because it has been a long sought after endeavor of intelligent men to try and recognize these descriptive
and intelligent men have gone in the opposite direction in trying to recognize ethics, by the way. So your implication that, that you have to follow what you're about to say in order to be intelligent, I would object to.
I think all that I'm talking about is that there's a set of universal attributes that human beings are endowed with by being human. You're born here, you're a human, you have certain attributes. I used the word entitlements the other day, and people had a fucking nerd about it. But the same way,
again, what would you be called? Give me an example other than fingernail.
For a human being, freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech.
I don't know what you're describing. So that's bullshit because I have the absolute ability to take a newborn, seal him in a cocoon to where he can't speak at all.
Okay.
And the only thing that can be done is that can be labeled as wrongful. But I've obviously made it impossible. It's obviously, possible to make it impossible to physically bar someone's freedom of speech.
Because you have the ability to take free will. So the squirrel is entitled to go and get nuts and eat and survive.
Oh my God. See, you just got done building all this on the premise that freedom of speech is some nature imperative.
Your ability to speak is something that is endowed to you. So again, we're talking about concepts. No.
Again,
let's build on the concept.
When I specifically made it impossible, it's endowed but not possible. What does that mean?
Well, because you, not nature, you as an individual within the system took an action.
I am part of nature. I am part of the universe.
Right. And so can
now,
sound.
Unless you're saying,
hey, hold on. Can sound levitate objects?
Yes.
Okay, so something in nature can break one of the laws of nature, gravity, right?
No.
Oh, it's not defying the law?
No. You have
What's
a
it doing?
drastic misunderstanding of what gravity is. The law of gravity doesn't mean that everything must fall.
How do you figure it doesn't?
Because you're not falling right now, are you?
I'm standing on the ground.
Ta-da, you're not falling. The law of gravity does not mean everything must fall. It must only fall when certain conditions are met.
So you have, so the freedom of speech exists until it's impeded by something. And you gave an example where
what do you mean by exist? It has no manifest existence.
Do you have vocal cords?
The thing you're talking about is
was the kid born with vocal cords?
If you're talking about vocal cords, that exists. If they were in fact born, there are people born without. But anyways, I mean, yes, that exists.
Question: Are you?
Your reification fallacy steps in when you say this concept exists because an instance of the concept exists.
The distinguishment.
And then you go on and use that concept as if it had its own manifest existence, and it doesn't. It's just a way to describe things that do exist.
So we're speaking right now. Is that a tangible thing or is that a fictional thing?
The events that occurred are tangible. Are events in history. Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Yes. So the semantics that you're getting into with the language in terms of how they are semantics, Gary.
Well, the semantic is necessary because you're trying to conflate two things. It's a reification fallacy. I'm trying to draw a line between existing and not existing that you're trying to leverage.
Right, and so you're purposely using language in such a way to stop it from being able to happen. You won't even let me get the position across.
Keep you from executing a fallacy.
You think it's a fallacy that man is endowed with certain attributes? So, like the ability to walk around, the ability to speak?
That is a straw man of my position. It's a horrible straw man of my position.
Sorry, say.
See, the attribute you gave was freedom of speech.
Let's not even say freedom of speech. Let's just say speech. Speech is an attribute that humans have.
Generally speaking, humans are born with the ability to develop the ability to speak. Yes.
Okay, and so conceptually,
that in itself isn't some.
So let me speak for like half a second here, because I'm going to draw out the thing that I've been trying to say for 30 minutes. Man has tried to recognize these certain attributes that all men and women share, which they should be free to exercise to pursue their full development. So for man to be all that he can be and have the potential to engage in creativity and do all these things and exist in the world, man has tried to recognize certain universal attributes that we all can exercise. Do you think that that's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think that's nonsense. What you just said, you abstracted every word into, instead of one man, you mankind, and
yes,
and,
all men. You're talking about universability.
No, well, I mean, evidently you're working on we'll get back to you what universalizability means, but you just abstracted the living hell out of the whole sentence in order to create a vagueness, in order to slip the fallacy in.
No. Right. There's no vagueness. I'm asking a very specific, Gary. It's a very specific question. Do you believe that there are attributes that can be recognized in all human beings that they should be free to exercise for their full development?
The is-ought conflation, right there. I can't. You've constructed a nonsense question that has an is-ought conflation in the middle of it.
I don't understand what those words mean, so your sentence sounds like Chinese to me. I'm asking a very simple question. Do you believe...
No, you're not. You're asking a question with an is-ought conflation in the middle of it. A nonsense question is not simple. It is impossible.
So explain to me what part of asking you if humans have universal attributes. If you think... I'm asking you, so let's break it into two separate things. Do you think humans have universal attributes that we all share?
I can't imagine any attribute of any person that you could say all humans in the world have.
How many people can live without breathing, Gary? So the attribute of breathing is something we all fucking share.
Okay.
It's very easy to do.
So the requirement of not being in the middle of the sun in order to exist for more than a fraction of a second. Okay. So if we're going
but now you're going like tangible. On planet Earth,
again, you're going weirdly insane on this here.
Do I need to define every sentence with like these clearly done parameters? You know that I'm talking about on fucking
because
planet
all I'm trying to do is give you no place to shove your fallacy into it.
There's no fallacy, Gary. You're trying to tell me that humans don't have universal attributes, and I disagree because I think that I could list them off.
I'm trying to figure out what you mean by universal attribute. Okay, the idea that a human being needs oxygen, I didn't. Okay, if we're going to that. Fine. But you said human being, not living tissue, because, all living tissue requires oxygen. So, I mean, we're getting silly here.
Well, you keep wanting me to define it. It's the only reason it's getting silly is because...
The only definition you gave was a freedom of speech example, and that's an abstract. And that was nonsensical. So it's like either you're going to the nonsensical, and I pointed out, and then you go back to oxygen.
But you just keep taking the word and relabeling it to something to suit your position to say that it's a fallacy. I'm saying speech is an attribute. Speech, the ability to speak, is an attribute shared by everyone that's born with vocal cords, right? And would you agree that like the ability to exercise? Do you think that the ability to exercise that speech is important to the development of an individual?
Oh, okay. So now important to a mental development, yes.
No, not yeah, sure. The mental development, the physical development, the whole thing. So that's the.
I don't know what else.
This is where you have to mix this whole bit where you're trying to say like you can't get pragmatic about it. If you want to live in reality and participate with other people and be here, the pragmatic stuff's coming into play.
Okay, but see, now that doesn't necessitate your system of labeling things. See, when you then branch off and say, because of this, we ought allow people the freedom of speech. Now you've just shoved your is into the ought, and it's called the is-ought fallacy. Is-ought conflation fallacy. There's a couple different ways.
I didn't say they have to do it. I'm saying that, so this is, again, conceptually. So once we get past the fact that, first of all, there's the physical existence, which can be, very simple if you want to just leave it there. And then there's humans interacting in groups. And as soon as you get into that, you're going to have concepts and fictions. It's inevitable. You cannot get away from it.
Okay.
Because your perception, your ethics, everything.
I agree that people are inspired by fiction.
No.
Absolutely.
I like that you use the word inspired because it makes it sound good. The reality is that every single human being engages in different fictions depending on the environment they grow up in, the culture that they're in, all the exposure that they have.
And those fictions can be horribly violent. So there's
no dispute whatsoever. Okay.
Yes.
So does it not make sense that we should develop certain fictions, certain concepts that eliminate that negative outcome? Wouldn't that be a positive?
Depends on how you define negative outcome. To me, negative outcome is anything that's unethical.
Disharmony. Negative outcome is disharmony.
Harmony and disharmony is very, very different than ethical and unethical. I divide things in unethical and ethical, and you're saying harmony and disharmony, and I don't think those align at all. So I'm saying I don't want your system and the line of harmony and disharmony.
I'm pretty sure that they're like almost synonyms. If you say harmony and disharmony are synonyms, then I'm fully on board that we have the same first principle and that we're labeling things correctly, as would be best for me and for you. Right. To create a symbiotic relationship with the things around me, right? A subpar decision is something that's only good for you. It's not good for the others, right? So we want to make the best decisions possible. That means it's good. I don't know
that if I say that others comes into play. I don't care if it's good for everybody but me and it involves my death. I don't care that it's good for everybody but me.
Right. And so that's a disconnect from the realization that you're part of everything else. You're part of the whole.
I don't give a fuck. Disconnect from the realization. I'm part of reality. Right. But I don't have some obligation to others that just
So see, if you don't believe that you have some moral obligation to others, then what would stop you?
I have the obligation of ethics to others. That's again, universalizability. One obligation and one obligation only. End of list. Anything else you concoct, I don't care about. Harmony, disharmony, legal, illegal, I don't care about. From labeling things as right and wrong, I need
to be clear on what you mean by that, because that sounds like a vague fallacy in and of itself. You've created a concept that says, like, this is the only thing I care about, and I don't give a fuck about any of the rest of you. So that implies that you
about the pragmatic decision after that. If I labeled something as right and wrong,
you've spent this entire conversation trying to avoid going and talking about the pragmatic side of things.
No, because you just now said there is none after that. See, I mean, we make our decisions. My first decision is labeling something as right and wrong, and then my next decision is evaluating the consequences nonetheless. I'm not going to do right no matter what the consequences, and I'm not going to do no wrong no matter what the consequences. That's not relevant to labeling something as right.
That's just a choice. So listen, if you want to make the physical, we both agree that everything is, and we get to choose how we set up the labels, and you want to choose your labels to be in such a way that it benefits you all of the time and the group some of the time, you're entitled to that, sure. I'm talking about trying to identify universal attributes that all people have and all people can exercise, right? And so you can talk about those things in a positive fashion to other people.
So something that everyone could exercise at the same time is what universalizability.
I never said that. Okay, I never said they could recognize it all at the exact same time. I'm talking about.
I mean the concept that everybody could not steal from each other. That's a universalizable rule. That's the point to that.
Yes.
That's what universalizability, by the way, comes down to is things. A system of labeling that, in theory, could be done by everyone.
Right. So, so what you're talking about, you're trying to reinvent the fucking wheel, man. They've already done it.
This has already been invented. Kant is known for this. Immanuel Kant, the reason you know his name is because of this universalizability. So I'm not reinventing any wheels.
The criminal law. Okay.
Bullshit. Now you're talking criminal law. We're talking about legal separation.
Yeah, but hold on. We're going to just go into a particular label that's used and it's played out by the fucking group here. This is a thing in reality. So the criminal law, as man has defined it, not the quasi-criminal bullshit.
Some men have defined it.
It has been recognized.
Some men have recognized it.
So if you commit harm, the moment that there's harm,
if you're dragging harm into it, you're back into ethics land, not legal land. So pick.
Well, it's pragmatic. It's physical. It's tangible. It's in the real world. I come over there. I punch you in the mouth, right?
Not all damage is harm.
Oh, you mean damage. See what I mean, Gary? You see what I mean about the semantics, man? It's almost like an intentional derailing of the conversation from getting anywhere.
No, because you keep muddying. You keep saying things that are definitely wrong. And
how is it definitely wrong?
I can't stand it because
how is it definitely wrong?
I cannot permit someone to say harm because harm is damage that is wrongful. Do you see?
Okay, so let me use it. Okay, so I'll use the word damage. I'll use the word damage. Okay, is that universal enough for you? Damage implies that there was a consequence from an action that was negative.
No, see, negative is harm. See, you're adding the labeling.
Holy. See, so you've spent... So,
by what system?
Gary, you must realize that your pursuit and study of words and your choice of definitions and perception of those words and how they're used creates the context. So I can be saying one thing with a particular intention to describe some particular idea to you, and you're receiving it as something not what I am saying, and then you repeat it back to me as this altered fucking idea.
We're in a discourse here, and I'm trying to identify and label a fallacy. And
right, but there is no fallacy. Harm is a thing that exists in the real world. People fucking go and hurt each other.
But okay. So see, if you say damage, I'm fine. But once you say wrongful or harm or negative, instantly you've then brought the labeling system that you're trying to justify.
Okay. So in this our magical labeling system here, when somebody does damage, how do you then proceed to determine the liability of the person who caused the damage?
Okay. So ethics,
which is determining what is right or wrong, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and is that based on your perception or some rule of law? Is that based on some natural law?
There is no such thing as a rule of law.
So then how do you determine? How do you determine what the ethics are? Are there universal ethics?
Define the first principle. You choose your first principle, and then I can answer the question.
Do no harm.
I've chosen my first principle.
Do no harm is my first principle.
Harm doesn't answer the question of what makes something right or wrong. So you've incorporated your own judgment in the word harm. I mean, is it just what you thumbs up?
No, I said do no harm.
But you're defining harm.
I never defined it.
It's an idea in your head. Okay, so anything I call harm, you're bound not to do. Great. Not giving me $1 million is harm.
Right. See, so now we're getting into the semantics of defining words, Gary. You got to understand that in the simple parlance principle. Okay, so do no damage. Do no damage. First principle.
Well, that's a very absurd first principle, and I can't really make much sense of it. The only way you can do that is by instantly killing yourself.
How do you figure it? You think my existence in math automatically causes damage?
Damage. You're damaging things all the time. It's what's defined. You're
exactly. So everything you're talking about trying to navigate this world based on applying your own chosen ways of defining words, and then when you go and speak with somebody, but what you're talking about is you get to reverse what other people are trying to say based on your perception of what they're saying, based on your choice of definition of the word they use.
Ethics is what defines right from wrong. And first principles is what defines ethics.
But you get to define, so everything, you get to choose all that shit. So
legal and illegal is not related to ethics in any sense of the way.
If I make my first principle domination, my ethics are going to be a fucking problem, aren't they, for you?
Yes. I will resist you and we will be at war.
There you go. So all you're talking about is defining the language to correlate or to communicate the idea to each other.
Yes.
Let's just
we cannot be at peace.
Okay, so let's just, instead of considering this is some kind of like somebody trying to win a conversation, because that's what it's been the whole time. It's like you're trying to suggest that I have a fallacy. There's this like winning.
I think we've hit a point where I've identified exactly where we stand. I think you've identified exactly where we stand, right?
I'm not really sure, because that's the whole point. It keeps being confused, and I keep being told that I have these fallacies.
I'm done trying to point them out, is my point. Right. I mean, I understand as much as I want to understand. I think the guys who are listening understand as much as.
See, and maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the thing that should be talked about, is that instead of continuing the discourse, your objection or your process.
You identified the fundamental problem.
What's the fundamental problem?
We have different first principles.
I don't know that we do. I don't know that I have a first principle like you're talking about.
Agreed.
I've never considered my belief structure or my perception in that manner before this conversation.
Agreed.
Okay, so but it doesn't mean I don't have a first principle.
If we can't communicate about it because you don't know it.
Well, why don't you should be able to ask? My first principle should be directly related to like the type of actions I take in the world, wouldn't it? You should be able to draw out what my first principle is.
Principled thinking, and you can have unprincipled thinking. Your first principle could just be whatever I feel like doing. That's fine, and it seems to be.
So define principle, because that doesn't make sense what you're saying, man. Like what you're talking about as a first principle is a governing piece of your perception and how you behave and the actions that you take should be, if I go out and I witness somebody or I talk to them or ask them questions about what they do in the world, how they behave with others, what they do for a living, all that kind of shit, I could get a generalization of what their first principle would be. No?
Possibly. A principle, someone who has a principled thinking, though, would be going to a principle that was clearer. Kantian principle, or the king, following the king unquestionably might be a first principle. Something like that. Queen in your case, perhaps.
No, absolutely not, man.
Well, I mean, not in your personal case. I mean, in the case of Canada and many people in Canada, for instance.
Yeah, sure. People that want to pledge an oath to an individual.
Yeah, and they've chosen their first principle. Their first principle is obedience to the queen.
Yes.
And that's wholly unethical that is, I'm at war with that concept because it is incompatible, and peace is very limited with people of that principle. If your first principle were the Quran and, Islam, we would be tremendously incompatible as well, you see.
Yeah, so I'm not a big believer in any. First of all, I'm not a believer of any type of thing like that.
My point is they have that first principle.
Okay, so
that is their first principle.
The thing that we can't seem to get past is like, okay, we agree that there's fictional constructs that govern human behavior, right? And you are not.
No, don't. You we don't agree with that.
So what do you think that those? You don't think that your first principle governs you?
I know I can't think of any definition of the word govern that would make that correct enough to say yes.
Wow. See, like that's a sideways fucking answer, Gary. It controls your decision making.
Again, I was answering honestly.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm trying to get at is you've got a predisposition towards the use of a whole bunch of different words. You've got a predisposition, generally speaking, towards anyone who might question the use of
to eradicating people. People make the mistake you're making very, very commonly.
What mistake am I making? I'm not even Gary, I'm not sure what mistake it is that you think that I'm making.
I agree.
Well, because you haven't made it clear. You use very fanciful. You use very fanciful psychological terms or
philosophical terms, but yes,
philosophical terms that are meant to describe something as you are seeing it, not actually specifically as I may be intending to relay the idea.
Correct. I cannot interpret it for you. I can only infer what I'm trying to infer.
That's right. And you tend to infer before I've even finished displaying the idea often in this conversation. So, and that's not, listen, right. I overtalk people
time limited. I don't have time to indulge faulty sentences that already begin on a faulty premise.
Sure. But it's an assumption so like when I said my first principle was do no harm, you went ahead and took the concept of harm and you're like, oh, well, you're defining that. as if that has some distinction,
okay.
as if that there's some distinction between, Gary, let me finish. That's what I mean. As if there's some distinction between my use of the word harm and your use of the word ethics. There's no fucking distinction. It's the exact same thing.
I will ignore all past implications of the word do no harm because you might mean something unique and new. And then because of that, I don't have time to really indulge the conversation.
Well, see, yeah, and so you don't have time to indulge a conversation that actually hits at the heart and threatens the concept.
If do no harm doesn't mean what it's meant for the last several hundred years, I don't know what to do with that.
Well, when I look at the definition of harm, it's pretty clear. Doesn't appear to be anything nefarious in there.
10-4. I agree. All right, I got to get going. Take care, guys.
Physical or psychological, listen to this definition. Physical or psychological damage or injury. That's the number one definition of the noun harm. So, Gary's out. Good talk, boys.